The map on the wall hasn't changed, but the ink is bleeding.
The global policeman didn't just retire, he burned down the precinct on his way out. We are now living in the era of the vacuum.
This is Neural Pulse. Let's analyze. Today's deep dive is focused squarely on the structural vulnerabilities of the international system. I mean, what sources are now calling a polycrisis?
Right, a polycrisis. A cascading series of simultaneous, mutually reinforcing crises across finance, security, technology.
And we're locking in on this critical strategic inflection point of January 15, 2026.
And that date is crucial because what we're tracking is this rapid loss of structural integrity. Our mission here is to identify the systemic risks that demand a fundamentally new kind of strategic thinking.
For leaders, for investors, for everyone.
Exactly. We're sifting through the noise to find the fault lines, the places where political talk and, ground reality just don't match up, because that gap, that's where the real danger lies.
And it seems like that gap is widening fastest right here at home. Let's start in Washington. We're seeing a severe crisis of confidence, one that's actively attacking the perceived independence of U.S. governance.
And it's targeting the Federal Reserve specifically.
Yes.
What's so fascinating here is that this isn't just, bureaucratic friction. It's an institutional integrity crisis being played out in the legal system as just a raw display of power.
Exactly. So the hard data we have is that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has opened a criminal investigation into FRB Chairman Jerome Powell. And the specific focus is alleged perjury. It's related to a frankly stunning $600 million budget overrun.
For a building renovation, the Eccles building.
Office renovation, $600 million is the kind of absurdity that you can weaponize.
And that absurdity is the pretext. The strategic intent here is it's nakedly political. Powell himself has said that the threat of prosecution is being used as a leverage tool.
To influence interest rates.
To influence interest rate decisions. Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The whole concept of separation of powers in the U.S. is facing a constitutional crisis.
Why?
If the head of the world's most important central bank can be criminally investigated for his economic judgment,
it just damages the trust.
It irrevocably damages the trust built into the dollar's global reserve status.
And the market reaction confirms this isn't just a fleeting thing, it's structural damage. We saw global capital just rush toward what analysts are calling stateless money.
Right.
Gold futures hit an all-time high of $46.50 an ounce on January 14th. Silver soared past $93 an ounce.
And you see, this isn't just inflation hedging like we've seen in the past. This is different. Investors are buying genuine insurance against U.S. financial governance failure.
Yeah, the president denied a plan to fire Powell, and that caused a little dip. But it was temporary. The structural fear is still there.
The system's credibility has been visibly violated.
And that institutional fear is now being compounded by political risk aimed right at the banking sector. I'm talking about the proposed populist strike on consumer credit.
The one-year 10% cap on credit card interest rates.
Exactly.
Well, current rates are, 20, 30%? A cap like that fundamentally breaks the entire profit model for consumer lending. Immediately.
House Speaker Johnson warned about unintended consequences.
Which is code for a massive credit contraction, especially for lower-income Americans. But the proposal itself is still a really potent political weapon.
And the market response just confirms it. JP Morgan, they beat earnings estimates, had a strong report.
And the stock still fell.
Still fell under this political pressure. But the real signal, the real canary in the coal mine, was Synchrony Financial.
Dropped over 8%.
Because of their high exposure to the subprime market. For them, regulatory risk is now the #1 concern. It outweighs everything else.
So this raises a big question for everyone watching. If the U.S. financial system's stability is being undermined from the inside, where does all that mobile global capital look for stability next?
Well, ironically, that search for stability leads us straight to a country consumed by its own instability, Iran. Let's shift to the Middle East. The internal crisis there is severe.
It really is.
The hard numbers, horrifying. Anti-regime protests have resulted in at least 2,586 deaths, over 18,000 arrests.
And that's significantly higher than the 2019 crackdown. It signals just pure desperation from the regime.
That level of violence speaks volumes about their fear of collapse.
But what's really dangerous for everyone else is the information war around it. Iranian authorities officially denied the death sentence for that protester, Irfan Soltani.
They said it was fabricated.
Right. But our field intel warns that the risk of secret executions is still extremely high. That divergence between what Tehran says and what's happening on the ground, that's the key intelligence factor.
And the U.S. response highlights this tension perfectly. The president initially threatened very powerful action against executions.
And then just did a complete 180.
A complete reversal. Suddenly, he's claiming on good authority that the killings have stopped.
So why the shift? Why the inconsistent messaging? It could be one of two things. Either it's a calculated move to buy time, let the internal chaos hopefully lead to a collapse without direct U.S. intervention.
A passive strategy.
Or it's an effort to de-escalate and avoid a regional war. Either way, the U.S. appears to be reacting, not controlling the situation.
And while Iran struggles, the new global alliances are on full display down in the global south. The BRICS plus naval exercise, Will for Peace 2026 off South Africa.
Right, and the diplomatic background here was intense U.S. pressure.
Washington threatened crippling 25% tariffs, basically taking away South Africa's AJOE privileges if Iran was allowed to participate.
And losing AJOE access would be catastrophic for their economy. So publicly they claimed they buckled, said Iran was demoted to just an observer.
But this is where we see that deception we talked about, the key intelligence finding. Local reports, and get this, even deleted social media posts from the South African military.
They got caught.
They confirm the Iranian corvette, the Iris Nagdi, was actively participating in the sea phase.
Not just watching, actively participating.
Right alongside vessels from China, Russia, and South Africa.
This is pure double dealing. They were willing to risk massive economic sanctions to send a political signal to Washington. That tells you a lot about the perceived value of U.S. influence right now.
And there's another signal here we can't miss. The UAE corvette Bani Yas also joined. That is its first ever joint exercise with the Iranian Navy.
So if you connect the dots, this is much more than just a naval exercise. It's a deepening strategic alliance network that's willing to openly defy the U.S. even at a high economic cost. This is the vacuum being filled.
Shifting to East Asia, the weaponization of economic dependence is becoming brutally clear. A political statement from Japan and an immediate massive economic counterstrike from China.
The trigger was Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi suggesting that an attack on Taiwan might be an existential crisis for Japan.
And China's retaliation was swift and surgical. They banned exports of over 800 dual-use items to Japan.
Which covers everything from semiconductors to aerospace parts. But the real threat, the one that really matters, is rare earths.
Absolutely. China controls most of the world's supply, and they're now imposing what is effectively an export ban through a strict license review.
This raises a terrifying question for all developed economies. Just how exposed are you when your foundational supply chains can be weaponized in real time like this?
And the answer seems to be extremely exposed. Attempts at decoupling from China have clearly been incomplete.
They knew exactly where to hit to maximize pain.
The economic cost data is chilling. For our listeners, Nomura estimates a 3-month halt on rare earths would cost the Japanese economy 660 billion yen.
Just a huge, immediate hit.
And if it lasts a full year, it could knock 0.43% off Japan's entire GDP. It risks production shutdowns for majors like Toyota and Honda.
And when Toyota or Honda shut down, that's not just a Japanese problem. That's a direct threat to the global supply chain. Japanese companies are now being forced to plead with Beijing. It just confirms their vulnerability was targeted perfectly.
Let's pivot now to the new frontier space and cyber, where we see this sharp, disturbing contrast between physical success and digital defeat.
A very sharp contrast.
On the positive side, NASA and SpaceX pulled off the first ever emergency medical evacuation from the International Space Station.
A huge success. Validated decades of contingency planning. 4 astronauts returned a month early. It was a critical test of deep space emergency protocol. It showed we can plan for the physical.
But the digital reality, it's bleak. It shows a fundamental failure in planning. The European Space Agency, ESA, suffered a massive cyber breach.
And the scope of this defeat is just shocking. The hackers stole about 500 gigabytes of proprietary data. We're talking operating manuals, source code, API tokens.
And information from major contractors like SpaceX and Airbus.
And the vulnerability wasn't even some genius-level hack. It was basic negligence. The attack exploited a known CVE that had been sitting unpatched since September.
To really show the listener the macro relevance of this, let's look at the UK's Jaguar Land Rover factory shutdown last year. That cyber attack was so severe, it halted production for 6 weeks.
Right. And the recovery from that attack, when production restarted, was a primary factor that boosted the UK's entire GDP by 0.3%.
Think about that.
A single corporate security incident can now swing the economic growth rate of a G7 nation. JLR's security budget is now effectively a national security issue.
Finally, let's look at a structural change in the economy, this one in the luxury sector. Saks Global, owner of Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
And this isn't just a standard retail failure. It's a systemic collapse of the traditional department store model. It was fueled by debt from the Neiman Marcus acquisition, sure, but also the irreversible consumer shift to direct-to-consumer online channels.
It's the death spiral.
Exactly. They couldn't pay designers, so they didn't get new inventory. No inventory meant lower sales, which meant even less money. A cycle they just couldn't break.
And the financial ripple effect is massive. The bankruptcy filing lists huge unsecured debts to the top global brands.
Chanel's the biggest creditor, owed about $136 million. Kering, which owns Gucci, is owed nearly $60 million. LVMH, $26 million.
Wow.
And the difficulty they'll have recovering that money will just accelerate their move away from wholesale distribution entirely. For the global luxury sector, the department store model is effectively dead.
So let's summarize the findings from this deep dive. We've tracked a deepening polycrisis across multiple domains, from the sanctity of the US dollar to the security of space infrastructure. Political rhetoric is unreliable, and systemic instability is the new norm.
The final synthesis is this. Leaders and CEOs have to operate under an assumption of normalized uncertainty. They have to invest in intelligence, especially the ability to tell the difference between real-world actions like the Iris Nagi in those drills from political maneuvering.
What really stands out to you here is this. When the rules of global order dissolve, the risk isn't just disruption. It's the radical repricing of every single asset and every alliance based on shifting political survival strategies.
Exactly. Now, consider that JLR example we discussed. We now know a single corporate hack can shift national GDP. So given the vast proprietary data stolen from the European Space Agency, all that tech from military contractors, what is the calculated, quantifiable risk that a hostile actor could now leverage that specialized space tech data to directly influence the trajectory of a Western economy? That's the ultimate cost of security negligence in the era of the vacuum.
Neural pulse. Clarity in a complex world. See you tomorrow.